I am being asked to manage too much regarding the Russells. Not only is he marrying our niece, but he's made our footman rich, which is upsetting to everyone in this household.
Not the footman.
That's right, not the footman at all. Welcome back to the official Gilded Age podcast, where we reveal the fact behind the fiction on the award-winning HBO original series, The Gilded Age. I'm Alicia Malone from Turner Classic Movies, and I'm joined once again by my mate. He's the host of the Bowery Boys podcast, the wonderful Tom Meyers. Hello.
Hello, Alicia. Good day, mate. I've been waiting to say that to you. Can you believe we're already on episode 5?
No.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And this episode covers so much territory. Like literally, it spans thousands of miles. I mean, we thought that going to Morenci, Arizona was a big deal. Today on the show, we're going to be traveling between New York and Newport and England.
Yeah, and that brings up a question I wanted to ask you. So if you could choose any of the fictional places to live in, like the Russell's house or the English castle, or maybe, one of the saloons in the Western town, what would you choose? Where would you want to live?
I'm thinking Mamie Fish's Newport cottage.
I was going to say the same thing.
No.
Yeah, because of that view. Beautiful.
And because of the porch.
Yeah.
Obviously. Well, there's probably room for both of us in there.
Okay, we'll both live there.
Today on the show, we will be talking through episode 5, and then we will be sitting down with 3 very special guests. Ben Ahlers, who plays Jack, Bob Shaw, the show's production designer, and Douglas Purver, the visual effects supervisor.
Yeah, there is a lot to get to, but let's start with the recap. This is season 3, episode 5, A Different World, written by Julian Fellows and Sonia Warfield, and directed by Deborah Kampmeyer. We begin with a reflection on a lake, showing a carriage going over a bridge. We are at Sidmouth Castle on the grounds, or the Parklands as it's sometimes called, and Gladys can't believe how large this estate is. The building too is huge. And Tom, I looked at pictures of Blenheim Palace online where Consuelo, Vanderbilt and the 9th Duke of Marlborough lived, and it looked quite similar to Sidmouth.
Yeah, it did. Or rather, it does, because, of course, it's still around today. You can visit Blenheim Palace. The palace was built in the English Baroque style in the early 1700s. So it's this massive stone structure with towers on its ends and, grand staterooms inside. And the whole place does sit inside a very large and landscaped park, right? And it was also in a really bad state when Consuelo first met the Duke and visited. But by the time they got married, all of that Vanderbilt cash was funding a huge renovation project, which actually prevented the Duke and the Duchess from moving right in after the wedding. They had to wait until the following spring in 1896. So Consuelo and the Duke actually took an extended honeymoon around Europe and even made it to Egypt. Unlike what we see on the show, by the time that they arrived and moved in, some work had already been done and much more was underway.
Yeah, well, Sidmouth could definitely do with some work. I mean, the inside is dark, cold, and empty, kind of like Lady Sarah. Ba-bum-bum-ting. She's giving Gladys the 10-cent tour, taking her down the bachelor corridor. And Lady Sarah is quite rude about Gladys's John Singer Sargent portrait. She says New York is the best place for it.
Yeah, that was a low dig. But Alicia, spoiler alert, the painting of Consuelo that Carolus Duran painted that we mentioned, back in 1894, today that painting hangs at Blenheim. So take that, Sarah.
Well, maybe Gladys can sneak her portrait over at some point.
I hope. But yes, our first impression here of the interior of Sidmouth is dark. And of course, during this rather condescending tour of the palace, Lady Sarah keeps dropping references to how deep her family's connections are to the palace. I'm starting to think this isn't really a tour. It's like a lesson in how important their family is.
Yeah, and all of this just underscores how much of a fish out of water Gladys feels like. She's also different from New York. Seems like it's a very lonely life for her, and she doesn't even understand the jokes they're telling at dinner.
But Consuelo wrote about this feeling, once they arrived in Europe, and her husband was surrounded by his people. She wrote, quote, "The sight of these strangers, Marlborough's family, brought the loneliness of my position sharply into focus. I realized that he would from now on be surrounded by friends and distractions that were foreign to me."
Oh, it sounds very, very lonely, and everything is foreign to Gladys. She can't get anything right. As she heads into dinner, Lady Sarah pulls her aside to scold her for wearing diamond stars in her hair, which I thought were actually quite beautiful.
They were lovely. I mean, look, Adelheid is doing her best. She's even calling Gladys Your Grace, right? Which I think they're both kind of smiling about. I thought that the diamond stars were a lovely gesture, but as Lady Sarah tells her, quote, "If I can wear a tiara, so can you."
Yeah, what does she mean by that?
Well, I have never worn one, so I can only go with what Consuelo wrote in her memoir. She said that her father gave her, for her wedding, a diamond tiara, which she said, quote, "invariably produced a violent headache." So keep that in mind. She also wrote that she had a 19-row dog collar made of pearls, which chafed her neck.
Whoa.
And we know what that can lead to.
Yeah, pulling at the pearls going flying everywhere. We've seen that happen in the show before. But poor Adelheid, she is sent packing over those diamond stars. The Duke seems to think that was very unnecessary, but Lady Sarah defends her choices to her brother.
Hector, I am trying to turn her into an English duchess. It's hard work and she's unpromising material, but I'm doing my best.
It was you who told me I must save the family with a Yankee heiress.
I suppose it never occurred to me that you'd have to bring her home.
It is nice to see the Duke slightly pushing back against her.
I gotta say, Hattie Morahan is like impressively unlikable as Lady Sarah. She must be having fun with that role. I will also note that in real life, Consuelo Vanderbilt did have some friction with an aunt of her husband, the Duke. She wrote, quote, "She seemed to me as hard as her polished appearance, and her prominent eyes, harsh voice, and sarcastic laugh made me shudder." And her name, Alicia, was Lady Sarah Wilson.
Aha. So, that's got to be an inspiration for this Lady Sarah, right?
Or quite a coincidence.
Yes, and luckily she has really strong parents who might help her out. But we need an update, and that is a Larian update. Big, big news. They go for a stroll through Central Park. Larry takes Marian's hand, whisks her into some kind of magical tree, and says,
Marian Brooke, will you marry me?
Yes.
What a magical scene that was. The shot inside that group of trees was just beautiful. The light coming through the leaves and the camera sweeping around them, and both of them were crying. So sweet.
I was crying. He found the most perfect canopy of leaves for that sort of sun-dappled lighting. It was very well done.
And it just made me think about the contrast between this engagement between Larry and Marian and the engagement between Gladys and the Duke, because Larry truly gets to choose his own partner and make a love match. So I'm assuming this would be true to the dynamics of this time, that men had more agency to pick their own life partner.
Absolutely. But the woman's family still had to agree. Need I remind you of Billy Carlton? Remember him? So, here in the case of Marian and Larry knows that he has to clear it, or at least should clear it also with Agnes and Ada, or at least get their blessing.
Yeah, so they go off to tell them. Unsurprisingly, Ada is pleased, Agnes less so, particularly when Larian both let it slip that Jack has made a fortune from selling his clock.
Which, once the lovebirds have left the room, leads to one of my favorite Agnes lines.
Well, I wonder how many more bolts from the blue I will have to endure before bedtime.
But can we also just address the fact that Larry will not be dining with Marian on their engagement night?
I would say cancel your plans, Larry. I mean, you can celebrate with your friend another time. But the next stop for Larian is across the street to tell George and Bertha about their big news.
Bertha is busy dressing for dinner, so they tell George first, who happily pops open some champagne, which reminds me of the last time that we saw champagne on this show around an engagement proposal.
Yeah, Bertha had that champagne on ice even before the Duke had proposed to Gladys. But here, George doesn't even wait for his wife to join him before he's popping the champagne and celebrating. He's really not giving Bertha any chance to object about this match.
Now, George is determined to have more of a hand in this wedding. Then into this little celebration walks Bertha on the arm of the ever so charming, or smarmy, Mr. Alfred Merrick. And Bertha is at first astonished, and then she is fuming that she was kept out of not just this engagement, which she clearly does not approve of, but also the fact that Larry is heading off to Morenci in the morning. Did you catch her face? That expression that she was making as she was sipping champagne and it was all kind of sinking in? She's not happy.
Yeah, I think she feels like she's being shut out of her own family and she does not like it. But while we're on the subject of Marian, let's skip ahead for a moment to a scene that takes place in Newport at the house where we are both going to live in the future, Mrs. Fisher's house, beautiful ocean view. Marian arrives at a party with Aurora Fain to show her support. Mrs. Astor is not happy that Aurora is invited to Mrs. Fisher's party, but Bertha is also standing strong with her. So do we know if this happened in your society? I mean, I know that women were excluded for being divorced. That definitely happened. But could that exclusion be reversed if someone powerful in society decided to stand up for them?
Well, I think the thing is that, up until Alva Vanderbilt and her divorce in the 1890s, divorce within the families of the 400 was exceedingly rare. Right? Because of the rules that Mrs. Astor fiercely upheld. That's not to say that women didn't dream of getting divorces. Elizabeth Drexel Lehrer, who decades later in the 1930s wrote the Gilded Age tell-all book called King Lear, was stuck in her own terrible abusive marriage. And she resisted divorce for many years because her own mother wouldn't receive anybody in their house who was divorced. Wow. And Elizabeth credits Alva for changing this when Alva got a divorce in 1895. So she, in fact, writes that Alva bragged to her, quote, "I was the first society woman to ask for divorce, and within a year, ever so many others had followed my example. They had been wanting divorces all the time, but they had not dared to do so until I showed them the way." And
is it true that she was the first?
Well, not exactly the first, but definitely the highest profile. And after Alva's divorce, it is true that the gates were flung open and many other women followed her lead. But that was in the 1890s. And remember that here we're in the 1880s. So it would have really been truly shocking for Aurora and Charles Fain to divorce.
Yeah, and again, we just continue to feel sorry for Aurora. She's basically forced to leave before even getting a chance to eat lunch. And she walks out with Marian by her side and says,
"I was invited to this when I was Mrs. Charles Fain. Now I'm no one." Aurora.
It's a sad moment, but I appreciated the fact that Bertha came to her side. When everybody else at the party was acting like she was contagious. But following the lunch, Mamie, she sort of lays into Mrs. Astor as only Mamie had the right to do.
"You're digging your own grave if you think you can bury Aurora Fain when Charlotte is headed for the divorce courts."
Oh, Charlotte.
You have one question to answer.
And what is that?
Are you willing to exile your own daughter from society? If not, you cannot exile Mrs. Fain. You have a difficult choice to make, Lena. I do not envy you.
I do not envy her. Yes. I love this moment because this scene is really capturing a dilemma that Mrs. Astor really did face. She really was forced to somehow reconcile her absolutist position, and, against divorce with the very well publicized and scandalous behavior of her own daughter.
And we know that Mrs. Astor's marriage was not a happy one.
Right. That was the whole thing. She and William Backhouse Astor basically lived like separate lives. He sailed around on his yacht, entertaining women and throwing parties, while Caroline Astor, was constantly being forced to make excuses for his absence. And she always pretended not to care one bit. But at least she didn't inflict a divorce on the family name. So, yeah, so in the show, she is holding Aurora to the same standards that she lived by. But what did that mean for, her own daughter?
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. But let's stay in Newport because I want to talk about Peggy and Dr. Kirkland. They attend a baseball game, which is Peggy's first ever baseball game that she's seen. And this made me wonder about the Negro baseball leagues, as they were called. Did they begin around the 1880s?
The so-called Negro Leagues would be established later in the 1920s. Here in the 1880s, professional baseball, which was a relatively new thing at the time, had established a color line, right, which mostly prevented Black players from joining any of the major leagues or minor leagues. And so, Black players formed their own teams and their own leagues. So what we're seeing portrayed here would have been part of this early Black baseball scene. And these are amateur players, right? They had other jobs.
Yeah, that's right. We hear that Dr. Kirkland is there to cheer on a player called Wilbur, who he says is his accountant, but also his friend.
Exactly, right. These leagues would remain mostly amateur leagues until 1920, when Rube Foster established the Negro National League. But that was decades away. So I think it's great that the show here is highlighting this very early period, which is often so overlooked in baseball history.
But also at the baseball game watching is T. Thomas Fortune. We will get to him in a second, but he offers Peggy a chance to interview Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, who was an important suffragist, abolitionist, writer, lecturer, poet.
She was a remarkable person. She was born free in Baltimore in 1825, and she became this celebrated author and poet and suffrage and temperance activist and abolitionist. By the 1880s, she was touring the country and she was giving lectures on all of these topics and often highlighting how these causes all work together. So yes, here in 1884, Peggy would absolutely have known of her, and it would have been quite an honor for her to get to go to Philadelphia to interview her.
Absolutely. But when Marian hears about Fortune's offer, she suspects that there may be a catch, although she tries not to clue Agnes in on exactly what happened between Peggy and Fortune. And Marian was right, because when Peggy arrives at the train station, there is Mr. Fortune with his bag, ready to go with her.
Oh, boy. And it gets confrontational right away. There's some back and forth suitcase grabbing. Fortune shoves Kirkland. Peggy has to step in and keep the peace.
Yeah, and I like how Kirkland emphasizes that he is Dr. Kirkland.
That's right.
Don't forget
Don't you
about
forget.
that. Don't forget. But let's go back to the Russell household, because George is struggling to get his railroad off the ground. Tensions are high, and he fires Clay. He says, I need someone to help me achieve the impossible.
I don't know. George really isn't winning over my sympathies. He seems, by and large, kind of stressed out and stretched thin, right? George does not necessarily seem like he's thinking clearly.
Yeah, can you tell us again about what George is trying to do here and why it would have been such a risky proposition?
Well, he was trying to build this coast-to-coast railroad, right? And for that, he needed to run through Chicago, which required controlling the Illinois Central line, which was a railroad that in the show is controlled by two main groups, the Merrick family and a railroad investor and financier who was named Risley Sage. Now, the Merricks, who we already met Mr. Merrick at dinner, they seem to be fictional. But Risley Sage really was part of the whole transcontinental railroad development story in the 19th century. And he was also a cutthroat investor, a colleague of Jay Gould's, and he was also directly impacted by the financial panic of 1884. So George fires Clay, and did you notice how on his way out the door, Clay turns around and tells George, "Wake up before it's too late." This is not the first time this season that somebody has told George to wake up.
Yeah, that's right. But George is not about to wake up. He's determined to keep going. And after hiring a new right-hand man in Brinkley, he enlists the help of his son, asking Larry to go to Morenci. And Larry quickly shows his business acumen. I mean, he has truly learnt from the best.
But I'm counting on you. I need this land for the railway expansion.
What's in it for me?
Okay, it's kind of heartwarming. I mean, the father seeing himself, the son, or the son in her father. It's also a little bit self-centered and kind of problematic, but but yeah, I mean, at least he has brought Larry into the plan here, right? To acquire the land in Morenci. And George is also bringing Bertha into the plan to help him. And for that, Bertha will need to throw a dinner. And as George says, make a fuss over Mr. Merrick and pull out all the stops.
And when she does pull out all the stops, George gets angry. I mean, he says he feels cuckolded and that it was all a waste of time. I mean, do you think his reaction is fair?
Maybe the problem is actually not that Bertha is flirting so much as that Mr. Merrick is flirting with Bertha, and she's quite enjoying it. I mean, George isn't giving her much these days.
Exactly. I mean, she does really seem to be enjoying that attention, and she keeps intriguing men all throughout this season.
She does. I also find it interesting that we're watching this dinner here with Merrick at the same time as Gladys's uncomfortable first dinner at Sidmouth. Now, there seems to be this link on the show between George and Gladys's stories. They are both the masters in some way of their houses, right? They're paying for their houses. And yet they're also both being left out and they're being disrespected in those houses.
So George is stressed out about losing everything and Merrick flirting with Bertha, his railroad. But Bertha is upset about the persistent rumors being printed about her family in the newspaper, even beyond Gladys's wedding. And she tells Church to find the spy.
It must be upsetting, ma'am.
I'm not the mistress of my own house anymore. I feel there's a spy around every corner.
You're sure it's a member of staff?
Or as I would call them, a traitor.
I'm enlisting the aid of Mrs. Bruce and Mr. Borden to help me find the culprit, madam.
Can they be trusted?
I hope so.
At this point, everyone is suspect.
Everyone is suspect, Tom. Everyone is suspect. And I love that George's solution is just that they should stop having so many secrets.
Simple.
And it made me wonder about this in real life, you know, where the details of large, wealthy households would be printed in newspapers. This happened quite often, didn't it?
Oh, yeah. Anything juicy that involved a bold-faced name at the time made it into Town Topics, which was that scandalous newspaper that was published by Colonel William Dalton Mann. As Greg King writes in his book, A Season of Splendor, Mann used, quote, a network of spies drawn from a wide swath, butlers who overheard conversations at dinner tables, maids who found compromising letters, and telegraph operators who regularly sent and received the most intimate of messages, which let him, quote, quickly uncover a wealth of high society secrets.
Across the road, Agnes has received another letter from the New York Heritage Society. She says she knows they just want money from her. But I want to know, was the New York Heritage Society real?
No, but the New York Historical Society is.
Okay, yep.
Or today it's known simply as the New York Historical. This is the city's oldest museum. It was founded in 1804, and it developed this impressive collection of manuscripts and artifacts and artwork, all of it relating to the history of New York and of the entire country. At the time of our show here in 1884, the New York Historical Society was located at 2nd Avenue and 11th Street. It would move up to its current location on Central Park West and 77th Street in 1908. So, spot on.
Okay, that checks out. But while Agnes is busy with that, Ada goes back to visit Madame Dashkova, the medium, who, by the way, is wearing a necklace of bunny rabbits. I don't know if you saw that.
Yes.
And Ada finds some peace.
This is it's a very sweet and also very sad scene. You know, Ada really opens up when she speaks out loud to Luke. But then Luke, you know, speaking through Madame Dashkova, kind of gives her a pep talk.
Yeah, and this really helps Ada because she returns home with some pep in her step, and she tells Agnes that she's going to start wearing some color in her wardrobe. Half mourning, she calls it, like some violet or some lilac. So, of course, Tom, I wrote down in my notes as I was watching, asked Tom about the mourning period for women and what half mourning means. I mean, how long did a mourning period last for?
Well, it depended on who was doing the mourning. But remember that while our show was taking place in 1880s in New York, back in England, the monarch, Queen Victoria, was mourning the death of her husband, Albert, who had died back in 1861. She would actually remain in mourning until her own death 40 years later.
Wow.
According to the Metropolitan Museum of Art's Costume Institute, it was customary to, quote, don mourning attire from 3 months to 2.5 years while grieving for the loss of a loved one. And yes, there were these phases. Full mourning meant just wearing solid black, while half mourning allowed the wearer to add a small amount of white or purple.
Okay, so we might see Ada in some purple soon. But let's go back to Larry. He is celebrating his engagement, / his business deal with Jack, and also a friend's wedding at the Haymarket. Now, this was a real place in a red light district of Manhattan.
Oh boy, was it ever. Yes, I am excited that the show is giving us a little bit of the Tenderloin here. The Tenderloin was the city's most notorious vice district, and it was referred to by clergymen who were regularly railing against it as Satan's circus because of the kinds of establishments there. The Haymarket was one of the most famous of its places, you know, and the Haymarket sat near the intersection of 6th Avenue and 30th Street.
And was it like we see in this episode, kind of anything goes?
Well, I think that to get past the vice patrol, which for a while was a real thing, the Haymarket actually enforced rules like, you know, there was no dancing with prostitutes, and women's dresses had to be so long, etc. But the Haymarket also helpfully provided, you know, little curtained off spaces behind which, you know, anything goes. But
you were telling me that it wasn't unusual for a gentleman of Larry's means to frequent places like the Haymarket. I mean, there was a term for it, right?
Slumming it. Yes, this was a term for men, usually only men of means, you know, who kind of went downtown for a night of crazy adventures. They went, you know, to bars and nightclubs and absinthe parlors and obviously houses of ill repute.
Although Larry doesn't seem to be doing anything wrong, and poor Jack just doesn't know what is happening. This is a whole new world for him. And then amongst all the madness, Larry spots a familiar face, Maud Beaton, or as she says, Dolly Trent.
Okay, so at first I thought that Larry was making eyes at somebody else, and I was like thinking I was going to have to step in myself. But then it was clear that he had spotted across that loud and boisterous room Maud. She's ascending a staircase with a client. She claims, of course, to be Dolly Trent, but you can see in her face that she knows she's been busted.
Yeah, and the first thing I thought was, I hope Larry tells Oscar about this, and he does.
Yes. I mean, but what is there to do? I mean, I thought that John Adams pretty much summed it up nicely over lunch with Oscar when John basically said, look, sounds like justice has already been served. He also, implies that the deception here was mutual, because if Oscar and Maud had actually gotten married, he would, quote, have stolen her entire life, which I got to say is a pretty modern spin on the story. I'm not sure that a closeted man would have said that back in the 1880s, but I'm all for it.
Yeah, and it is true, although I'm sure being wed to Oscar would have been much better than working in the Haymarket. But anyway,
Probably.
let's leave that there, and we'll go back to the Russells for the final scene. Throughout this whole episode, George has been worried about Gladys. He doesn't know how she's doing over in England. So when her letter finally arrives, he is angry at Bertha.
I don't know if I'm angry with you or myself. You made me weak, and I find that hard to forgive.
Someone said the Gallia set sail the day after tomorrow.
What will you say to her when you get there? You can't make her love him.
I can fix this, believe me.
That's the problem.
I don't think I do believe you anymore.
I can solve this sooner than you think. I'll be there before Larry even sets foot in Morency. I'll make everything right.
Do what you want. Don't expect me to be here when you get back.
Oh, no. Bertha looks crushed or panicked, or like she's quickly trying to figure out how to fix what has become a total mess.
Yeah, and usually Bertha can fix it, so we'll have to wait and see.
So why don't we just leave all that drama there? But when we return, we have not one, not two, but 3 interviews to share with you. We'll be speaking with Ben Ahlers, who plays Jack, plus production designer Bob Shaw and visual effects supervisor Douglas Purver.
Anything you want it to be. Women, drinking, entertainment, men, if you fancy. You want gambling, there you have it.
Mr. Barry, I'm not sure what to make of all this.
It's not complicated. Enjoy it. You have money now. You can afford a more interesting life. Make sure that you do.
Well, Ben, it's so lovely to meet you. I'm excited to chat because Jack has been one of our favorite characters throughout the show. What do you like personally about Jack as a character?
It's funny because we started filming this in the middle of the pandemic when there was this great uncertainty in the world. It's not lost on anybody on this audience, the parallels between the dynamic nature of the 1880s as well as the period of great change we're experiencing right now. And so to have Jack as kind of a guiding light throughout my personal life has been really helpful because he has this sense of presence and gratitude for the people that he works with and the role he gets to play. He does his job so well, and he finds so much joy and play and humor in the midst of it. He also is always willing to allow himself to dream. And so I love that.
We were talking with Julian Fellows about Jack being sort of the embodiment of the very idea of the American dream. Do you see him in that way?
I do. Yeah. Julian has such a specific eye on America coming from the UK. He has this appreciation for how a country could become so big and great in such a short amount of time. And it was also, it was groundbreaking for someone of Jack's station to be able to elevate and pursue. Most people get the American dream confused. I think sometimes we have just different definitions, right? It's not necessarily to be rich and famous and all powerful. It's to be able to make a life for yourself. And I think that's what Jack wants. And so, yeah, I do.
And it's interesting because Jack, it's not like he doesn't enjoy his work or he's really wanting to get out of the Van Ryn house or that he particularly wants to become rich. He just has this invention and it becomes successful. So you see with him sort of the flip side of that dream that once he becomes rich, it's kind of like, well, what am I going to do now?
Yeah, there's great sacrifice to pursuing a dream. It's very destabilizing. It's devastating in a way, right? You have to grieve what you're leaving behind, especially when what he's leaving behind was the first family that he's ever known after losing his mother in the fire and, kind of having survived on his own from a very young age. But what's also nice is, and I've experienced this in my own life, is that because his needs were met so well by his family, he was able to want beyond that, right? And so it's because he has the love and the support of this house, both upstairs and downstairs, that he knows that there's a soft landing if things didn't turn out. And I think he's just filled with so much. He's aware of that, I think, and obviously very, very grateful for it.
And you must have been excited as an actor to get the opportunity to take Jack in this new direction this season. I mean, we see him essentially becoming a man and becoming a gentleman, buying his suit, becoming rich, and having to figure out who he actually is.
Yeah, I'm from a small town, Iowa, and so moving to New York and pursuing something like this was certainly a risk, and it brings its own challenges. And obviously, with the great reception of the show, there's been this really beautiful kind of mirror to stewarding Jack through his own version of that that process. I admire how kind of wide-eyed and present and grateful he is for it. I try to keep that sense of wonder in my life as this show continues to reach people.
Speaking of wide eyes, I think something that you do very well as an actor is acting with your eyes, because we really know what Jack is thinking because of the way that you portray him through your eyes. And I love the scene where Larry and Jack are negotiating over the clock, and when Jack realizes that 6 means $600,000, it's just very wide-eyed. What do you remember about filming that scene?
Well, Harry Richardson and I have become very, very good mates over the last 5 years, and Harry and I we're a dangerous duo. We have a lot of fun, and I remember, Jack doesn't get to leave the house much, and so I got to participate as Ben in witnessing Bob Shaw's world building, really for the first time outside of the Brook House. But to witness this whole clock office emerge out of thin air, and to really feel anchored in this aspect of the storytelling was very, very exciting to be able to experience that with one of my best friends.
That's nice that you have that friendship. I think it comes across on screen with the chemistry between Jack and Larry. They have this sort of bromance, and it's nice to see Larry supporting Jack and taking him to get a suit. I mean, it's a very sweet friendship.
I mean, Harry does it to me in real life. We'll be just walking down the street in Williamsburg, and he'll pull me into a sweater shop and demand I buy a sweater. So,
so he's smoking a cigar at the same time and telling you how to be a gentleman.
Yeah. I learn a lot from that guy.
Well, as you say, Jack rarely gets to leave the Van Ryn house, and he's known as John upstairs and Jack downstairs, and definitely has to carry himself in a different way upstairs. Do you think about him as having these two different sides to his character?
Yeah, it's why I think we can see him thrive in the environment when they're going to pitch the clock. You have to think about these servants at that time. They were, so much of their life was spent in silence, witnessing society unfold, and being in the inner sanctorum. He's been pouring tea and standing in the background for hours. And so I think there's this, I wouldn't necessarily say chameleon, but I think he's seen so many walks of life, both in his personal life growing up, as well as these titans of New York society coming through the drawing room every day, that he knows how to code switch. It's a very modern term, but to adjust to the environment.
As far as I know, Jack isn't based on a specific historical character or a real life person. So what did you use for research to help you inform who Jack is?
The Horatio Alger stories of the 1800s were very, very helpful. They were kind of these first little novellas of newspaper boys finding a way to start a conglomerate and make some money and finally buy their second pair of shoes, right? It was this acknowledgement of a young man's specifically ability to make a life for himself, even if it wasn't, again, to the scale of George Russell. The writing does so much of the work for us. Julian leaves these little breadcrumbs in this paletted story structure where we all get these moments, and sometimes it's literally just an eyebrow raise at a temperance meeting. Yeah. But they're really fruitful moments to push that story along and to build that character. And so I found those clues throughout the script. And then, we've been so supported by our historians, but then specifically once the clock storyline started to emerge, the Horological Society of New York was completely vital to having, both on the art direction side of knowing what our diagrams should look like, knowing what exactly I should say to the clock manufacturers, and to just, for me, to have a more kind of unconscious, intuitive sense of how to operate these tools so that I wasn't in my way and I could just kind of like let the surprises of the scene work play out without getting too bogged down.
Yeah, I was going to ask that, whether being on a show like this set in a period has taught you anything or made you look at your modern life in any different way?
There's such an attention to detail in this show, and everyone operates with such mastery over what they do. And I think today there's a lot of class tension right now. And we can look at the elite and high society and the rules around it as disconnected and othering and missing the point. And in a lot of ways, that is true. That said, there also is something to really caring about the way that you show up in the world, and putting on not necessarily an expensive piece of clothing, but just clothing that expresses who you are and shows your level of respect and care for whatever environment you're walking into. Yeah, Kasha's costumes and Bob's designs and Julian's writing and Chris and Manuel, there's so much care and attention to detail that it's kind of hard to go home and not notice where you're not up to par in that way, because you're around people who really, just for the love of the work and love of their life, really step up. And so it's been cool to try to craft my own taste and see what type of man I want to be in the world. I was telling somebody yesterday, this TV show has been the mirror, the kind of life force of the last 5-6 years now. And so it's still continuing to change me every day in that way.
I love that. And I know you grew up really being a fan of musical theater, right? And you were very excited to meet people like Kelly O'Hara on the show. And I know now it's season 3, so you know everyone very well, but do you ever get over the fact that you're working with so many Tony Award winners?
I'll never really get used to that. And I don't really want to. I love being inspired by the people around me. I don't want to get tired of the excitement, right? I think you can really just choose to be a student of your colleagues, and then I'll say, we have been spending a lot of time together, and so there is this I'm just so grateful for our collegial, familial connection that this cast has chosen to manifest throughout the last 5 years. If I see Nathan Lane out on the street and he recognizes me, I still have to kind of look over my shoulder to make sure that he's talking to me. But yeah.
Is there another Ben right behind me?
Totally.
Well, it's been so much fun to watch Jack this season. So Ben, thank you so much for your time. Great chatting.
Thank you, Alicia. Appreciate you.
Alicia, that was so great to hear your interview with Ben. First time on the show. I wish I could have made it.
I know. You would have loved him. I mean, I wish you were there with me. Such a nice guy, and great to talk to him about Jack's incredible storyline this season. But you were with me for our second interview of the show. Here he is, one of our favorite guys to talk to. This is production designer Bob Shaw.
Well, Bob, it is lovely to have you back on the podcast. Before we dive into your work on episode 5, you are now a 2-time Emmy Award nominee for episodes from season 1 and 2 of The Gilded Age. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Are we seeing some differences? I mean, in this third season, Alicia and I have been talking about some like new spaces that we're feeling like we're seeing on the show. Are there many new spaces here in season 3 than in season 1 and 2?
Our world keeps expanding. We have scenes that take place out west. We have scenes that take place in England. We have scenes that take place in the different parts of Newport that would have been the home of the Black elite. The world just keeps getting bigger.
Yeah, so far this season, we have been to the familiar places and new places, and episode 5 begins at Sidmouth Castle, and actually it begins on the grounds or the park of the castle. So what did you want that first impression of Sidmouth to look or to feel like?
Sidmouth should feel like a whole other ball game than what we've been playing. As large as our houses are in Newport and the little cottages, the scale of an English country home or a palace like meant to be sort of similar to Blenheim is beyond. So size is what we were hoping to hit you with initially, and also the idea that it's in the country and that it is set among like rolling hills and greenery for mile after mile, and just how big the grounds were in addition to the house itself.
Yeah, I'm curious to know the location of those grounds, because I know that you usually film around Long Island, but to me, the bridge that the carriage goes over looked like the Palladian Bridge, just our head in the UK in those gardens, but I'm not sure if you actually went to the UK or not.
We did go to the UK. The bridge actually was filmed in Long Island, and then some of the grounds were filmed elsewhere. And it as usual, we piece it together. Sometimes it seems to take a minimum of 3 locations to make one location.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
It's seamless.
And that exterior is so impressive of the castle. How much of that is real?
Not that much of it. We started with the idea that we had to film most of it in Newport, and we were in front of Ochre Court, which was the second biggest place in Newport, but it was nowhere near big enough, and so we ended up having to extend in all directions. Ochre Court has a mansard roof, and it was the only place that we really could cook up that was big enough to film in. And I said, well, it couldn't look more French with this massive mansard roof. So the first thing I did was like look up a number of country estates and decide which one we would like slice the top off and plunk it on top of Ochre Court. And it's what we do.
Wait, so is that what you did? So you're using a Newport cottage as part of?
Yeah, we're using Ochre Court, and we used some grounds that we found elsewhere in Long Island. They literally scanned the place in 3D, and then they put the new roof on top of the other place. By the time we're done, there's not that much left of where we've practically filmed.
That's amazing. We're going to be actually speaking with Douglas Purver, so we will probably be touching on this again. But the scanning that you're talking about, it reminds me of when we were talking with you and I think Douglas in season 2 about the Opera House, right? Didn't you use a similar technique to create the interior of the new Metropolitan Opera?
Yes, the Opera House was a movie theater in Albany. It was Academy of Music in Philadelphia, and it was also another part of another movie theater. So, and then we built the boxes on stage. So we kind of Frankenstein these things together.
It's amazing.
Well, I'm curious then if you're ever thinking about creating a location completely with visual effects or possibly even AI. I mean, what's the purpose of using a real location?
A better starting point to have a real location. People coming out of a real building, people, what the actors interact with, it's just better when it's real. And even as skilled and as advanced as things are in the world of computer generated imagery, it's very hard to do a building from scratch and have it convince me, at least. I mean, other people might not notice, but I'll look sometimes and say, oh, I wish we'd had a real house for there. I guess the song is right. There ain't nothing like the real thing.
Yeah, and there's not much of the real thing left, right? So that's why you need to use visual effects.
Certainly with our constraints of, we didn't have the time to pop over and do a bunch of scenes and transport all the cast to England. And I mean, it's just not practical. It's the same thing with, in the beginning of the season when we were in the West, where we weren't going to all suddenly pick up and go to Arizona.
We were astounded when Morgan told us in our interview in episode 2 that actually that was just like on the back lot, right? And much of that was on the back lot, just feet from 61st and 5th.
We tore up the ferry landing from season 1, which had been sitting there, wondering if you would ever need it again, and built the Western town there.
When we head inside Sidmouth Castle, we see how much it contrasts to Gladys's home in New York. I mean, it's pretty cold and it's austere. It's quite empty. So can you tell us how you wanted to use production elements to make this feel that way and to make it feel different from Gladys's place in New York?
Sure. The idea that she has every modern convenience and things in the castle are 500 years old or more. That the whole purpose of her marriage was to spruce up the estate. And I love Ochre Court. It's a fabulous place. It was the largest home in Newport for 2 months before the breakers opened. Yeah. But the entry, it's a 3-story sort of open, with balconies running all around it. It's just a spectacular location. And again, even though it's not in England, walking in, it's a whole different scale than the Russell home. So it's like she has better detail or better upkeep of the Russell home, and then it's in this massive place that looks a little tired. And the biggest issue really was how tired it should look.
Yeah.
Because, and then sometimes my research always gets me into trouble. Because Blenheim Castle is obviously the model and Consuelo Vanderbilt's story. And they had sometime in the 1850s sold off like the better part of their library of rare books. And right. They were selling off the paintings that were not family portraits because, otherwise it would be like selling a family member. So they only sold landscapes and other kind of paintings. And it's like, well, they're not totally destitute. They still have this massive castle. It needs some plumbing and modern conveniences, but it's not like they're camping.
It must be so interesting to actually be on those sets. But so the interior of Sidmouth Castle, if I'm hearing you right here, is
Ochre Court.
Is Ochre Court. All of those different rooms, even the dining room that we see.
Well, no. Actually, the main entrance when they first come in, no, that's actually it's in Long Island at the Glen Cove mansion.
Oh.
So I'm always on set at the beginning of the day saying, don't look further than this. This is the end of frame, because if you get past that, then it doesn't look like it's part of this house. I always have to sort of establish the boundaries, and people still get directionally confused in the Elms, because we have the peculiar situation of it being both their Newport home and parts of it being used as the Russell Mansion in New York.
The kitchen. Another new spot that the show takes us into in this episode is the Haymarket, notorious den of vice. What went into your research and into recreating that space?
So the Haymarket was a big white box with a contemporary staircase on one side and a very shallow stage, and it was just all white. In my catalog of things I've always wanted to do, in the Vanderbilt Mansion on 57th Street, the enormous one, it was very common to have what they called at the time a Moorish themed room or a Turkish room, which was usually a smoking room. And so I just picked that theme, and we actually, the graphic department made all of this pattern, Islamic sort of detail, and we printed it on like self-adhesive vinyl, and literally plastered it to the walls. And then we had to make things to disguise the contemporary railing. It was a big transformation. I think everyone was pretty shocked to come into this kind of Moorish Islamic fantasy. I actually wish we'd filmed there more, because it was a big effort and a lot of work, and I think we saw it twice.
That's amazing. I think there is one shot, right, where you can see some of the Moorish detailing, like in the ceiling around.
Yep.
So there was a lot of that going on there.
We didn't really see most of it. It was a fun thing to do.
Yeah, and I'm sure it all adds to just the feeling that you get on camera. You kind of need that level and layering of details you can't skimp out.
It's good for people to feel that they're in a complete environment. I was just the other day explaining to a producer why on set we need to put things in the drawers and we need to put things in the closets so that people feel that it's a real space. It's important, you know, when someone improvises a bit of business and they open a drawer and it's empty, it sort of takes them right out of the moment.
Yeah, my thing is I hate when you can tell that no one has anything in their coffee cup.
Oh, right.
But while we have you here, can we touch on Gladys's wedding? Because the church looked incredible. What did you draw on to create the look for St. Thomas's Church during the wedding?
Well, there are illustrations and some photos of Consuelo's actual wedding. And again, as over the top as it seemed that we were restrained compared to the historical model. They had dozens of palm trees on the altar. I would have done flowers and I would have done other foliage, but it would never have occurred to me to start decorating a church, an Episcopal church, with palm trees.
Except on Palm Sunday.
But
It's interesting hearing you talk about the restraint that you showed in sort of designing those interior spaces, because it takes me back to something you've told us in previous seasons about the restraint on, say, the interiors. For example, the Van Ryn house, right? That if we saw today how busy those interiors were, we would be kind of put off by that. You bring this kind of modern sensibility to it. One interior that's not so restrained, I think, is that we see in episode 5 is Madame Dashkova's interior, which is quite a bit busier, right?
Right. Yeah, that was fun. We just piled it in and more stuff on top of more stuff.
There's a shot where you look down and I think you see the table like over her. You see a big carpet, an oriental rug, plus a chair, rocking chair with a pad with another pillow on it. There's layers on layers.
Well, that's what we were going for. And I particularly loved the, I don't know whether it was a tablecloth or a rug or something to put as the main surface on the table, but it had at least 3 underskirts in addition to this really fabulous embroidered thing.
Well, you do such a great job. So, Bob, thank you so much for your time. It was great to talk to you again for the 3rd time.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
Wow, that was really fun. As always, talking to Bob Shaw. I really find it fascinating just to hear about, what a jigsaw puzzle all of those locations are, especially in Newport.
Yeah, it definitely reminds me more of a film production than a traditional TV production. It's fascinating. And Bob is such a nice guy. And he mentioned, working very closely with the visual effects team. So let's go to our next interview. It is with someone we have spoken to before in this podcast, Douglas Purver. He is the visual effects supervisor. So let's take it away. Well, Douglas, it's so nice to talk to you again. Thanks for coming back on the show.
It's great. Thanks for having me.
And just as a reminder to people who not think of The Gilded Age as being a show that requires visual effects, would you say that your job involves enhancing what's on screen and maybe enlarging some of the real locations used?
Yeah, I think, this show obviously takes place in history. It's not a modern show. So a lot of the places that we're filming or a lot of the places that these stories are taking place either don't exist anymore or they are just surrounded by our modern world. So there's a lot of extending, adding on, or removing involved in a lot of those locations.
Do you think a show like this could be done in a virtual environment, like completely on green screen, or do you always need to have partial locations, practical sets, physical objects for the actors to be surrounded by?
It's a debate I think a lot of people like to talk about. I mean, for a lot of us, we love to start with as much practical as possible. For my line of work, being selfish, I, get all the information captured in camera that I can, textures, perspective, lighting, all that stuff is kind of, as much as you have in the frame, gives you all the clues you need to make the extension that much better. And
well, in today's episode, in episode 5, we see for the very first time Sidmouth Castle. And we have heard from Bob Shaw in our conversation with him that Sidmouth was a combination of a real location and visual effects.
Absolutely. Yeah. Bob and I collaborate very closely, especially on big pieces like this. There's a lot of research that goes into what he wants to put on the screen, obviously. So he'll, start with pulling all these different houses, references of all these houses that would be accurate for the period, the time period, the location, all of that kind of stuff. And then, then we hit all the constraints of like, where are we actually going to film this? Do logistically, budgetarily, schedule wise, we just could not bring our company over to England to shoot into one of these, beautiful old stately homes in the countryside. So it was, the challenge was, what can we find here stateside that would give us the best handshake for, the foreground, middle ground to shoot with our actors. And then I would then take over and create the rest of the background there. Sidmouth Castle was kind of based or loosely based off of Longleat House, which is an old house built in the mid 1500s, so 16th century home, Elizabethan style, out in Warminster, out in England. And it just had the perfect like vibe. It was like beautiful, the stone color, all the detail on the roofs. The grounds themselves were also perfect. So we decided to use this as our base for reference and inspiration. And because we can't carbon copy this house, we had to kind of change it to make it a fictional thing. We used other houses to also inspire us. So Blenheim Palace was another big a house that we used to style our Sidmouth off of. It's almost easier to kind of replace the whole thing and then bring back what's practical. So we knew we wanted to see this house from multiple different angles. It wasn't going to be just one shot. So to do that, we have to build a three-dimensional asset of the whole house using some of the scanned data that we had that creates a geometry, but also lots of photogrammetry, which gives us all those textures and all the colors and all that real life weathering and grit that you get from stone being out in the elements, obviously. So it was a huge, it was like a big, conglomeration of all these different things.
It's amazing and so seamless too. You don't even notice. And I wanted to go back to episode 1 because the whole season begins in Arizona, in Morenci. And Tom and I were surprised to hear that it wasn't shot on location in Arizona. What did you and your team have to do to make that look and feel like the Wild West of Arizona?
Yeah, that's another one that was great. We went out to New Mexico. We scouted some locations with Michael Engler and the cinematographer, Manuel Billeter, and we found some really nice locations that we thought would fit well for where this town would be situated and also like what the road to this town would look like. And so we had a second unit that we went out there and filmed all these plates. We had some horses and carriages to show that journey. And then this one little location called Cat's Paw, which was nestled within these little rock escarpments and mountains and stuff, felt like a great little spot for a town. It felt like protected. And we decided that's where the town would be. We scanned that whole environment. We did a lot of drone photography that, I don't know if you remember, there's one shot that kind of rises up over the rock to reveal the town.
Right at the beginning.
Yeah. So that was a drone shot that we then placed the town into.
I want to stay in episode 1 for a second because we cut from Morenci to New York to 61st and 5th, where there's a snowball fight, right?
Yeah,
it's like it's a great winter scene. Both the staffs are sort of having a snowball fight and frolicking in the snow. How much of that was real?
There was a lot of real snow on set. Our special effects department did spray down Epsom salts and foam and all the different kinds of things. But as you know, with the backlot itself is a huge visual effects piece component for the show. With us, we extend all those buildings. We then had to extend the snow on all those buildings. We had to extend the snow into the background. We had to make Central Park look like the trees had been covered in snow. So you have, again, it's always that handshake that I like to refer to where it's where do we end the practical stuff and where does the digital pick up? And then even on top of what was practical, we added some bigger mounts that we just couldn't practically build. Things that, snowdrifts that would like pile up against the building or, huge mounts that they've been shoveling off. What's practical versus digital, all those things really help the performances, which just make the whole frame better, you know?
Absolutely.
And in the last episode, we saw Gladys's wedding. So did your team work on that event to make it feel even more spectacular?
Absolutely. I mean, there's, you know, only so many people that we can dress in all those beautiful gowns and everything. So there's a lot of crowd duplication for that church. We brought in another motion control camera system so that we could do some complex camera moves, but then also be able to duplicate all the people that are there. So it's kind of like you're shooting the same thing over and over again, moving people around to different locations so that then when we get all the pieces later, we can cut them all out, put them in, and you have this full church that's, you know, just full of spectacularly beautiful dressed women and men. And then we did small details in there too. There was something that happened on the day while we were filming where some of the natural light was coming in with the stained glass windows, and you had this like color wash that was kind of hitting the pillar at times, but unfortunately it didn't ever happen while we were actually filming the scene. And it was just something that was so beautiful that we kind of made a mental note of, and we started bringing some of that into the wedding scene in general. So we would add these splashes of color on the columns, on the walls, and it just kind of helped, you know, congeal this beautiful space together.
Yeah, help make it feel magical, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly.
And at the end of that episode, one little magic moment that I noted was as Gladys and the Duke are sailing away through the little porthole, we see New York and we see the Brooklyn Bridge, which was new at the time. You know, what did that involve to kind of create 1880s New York in this little hole, this little window?
That was a very big build for one shot, one moment. Obviously, there is nowhere we can film anything to get that look. So it was a lot of creation on that side of it. We did shoot plates on ferries that go around Manhattan just to kind of get a sense of distance and speed and like what that view actually entails, just to kind of give ourselves a baseline. And then we had our Brooklyn Bridge asset from last season. I don't know if you remember all the big fireworks and stuff. So we knew we had to bring that back into it. We had that ready to go. And then we just, you know, over 3 seasons, we've been building lots of different buildings for distant work, right? So we have a library of all historical or period accurate buildings that we can kind of pull from and start to build a skyline. We have lots of photographic reference, historical reference of what the seaport looked like, what, you know, different shorelines looked like of the city. And so we used those as our like baseline. We kind of like mapped out little buildings to kind of hit that, to make that skyline look accurate. One of the things that I love most about that period were the piers that are just bristling with the boat masts. There's just masts everywhere, lines, sails. It just looks messy and like just really textural and great. And that was something we really wanted to try to capture. So we just filled the boats in there and just like stacked them all up into the depth. And it was just really, it was a fun process.
It was messy, right? Those docks were messy at the time.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, and you've kind of brought that some of the grit of old New York to the city, you know, to the streetscape as well. Because I love noting, you know, like the smoke coming out of the different buildings because, of course, they were burning all kinds of coal and fuel.
That's right. Yeah. Yep. We're putting smog layers in there. We are at it. We have it's called the horse poop pass, where we make sure that that the street is sufficiently you know, covered in the detritus of all the animals that are, you know, just there all the time.
It's very important. You know that people will mention it if they say those streets are too clean.
Exactly.
Doesn't look right. Yeah. I mean, the East 61st Street obviously has to maintain a little bit of a, you know, a higher brow. They keep it clean. They hire their street cleaners, but everywhere else, yeah, we try to bring in that messiness.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's a lot of talk in your field about AI and how that might help or hinder your work. But it strikes me that visual effects, even though it involves a lot of computers, it does require a human touch because it's the human eye that can tell if something feels real or doesn't feel real, that kind of uncanny valley effect, right?
Definitely. Yeah. And I think, you know, there's a lot of talk about it. You know, visual effects have been using aspects of AI for a long, long time. The way our algorithms work to track cameras or, you know, all these pattern trackers and stuff, it's all kind of some of that same language that's just now evolving to a different level. The tools are progressing quite a bit, but, you know, there is that human aspect that I feel is absolutely necessary. It's like, there's still somebody's vision that needs to be served, and to be able to direct those images in a way that is going to, give them the product that they're looking for, whether it's the director, producer, whoever's, behind it, there needs to be somebody who's able to funnel that in the right direction. I don't think the capabilities of them doing it by themselves are just not there yet.
I'm just wondering, because we're now in season 3, is the job getting any easier? Are the visual effects getting any easier? Is there any change to it? Or are you able to use effects from previous seasons?
That's a good question. I think as you go on with any show, I think there's a shorthand you develop with the crew and all that stuff. So the side of doing the job, like getting things done, becomes easier. I think as you keep delivering things for the show, things that they, are dreaming up start to get bigger and bigger, because you've done something that is very successful, and they're like, oh, well, now what can we do? Or, what can we dream up now? And this season specifically, I feel like we've reached out a bit more beyond the city, right? We've gone to the West, we've gone to England. There's like the scope is kind of starting to drift open a little bit more, which is lovely. It's really nice. And so that presents a bit of a challenge in the sense that, all the research that we've been doing for the first 2 seasons holds up for our New York stuff, of course, but now we have to kind of expand our library and see what, where these other aspects, where these other areas, what attention to detail do they need? What can we bring to make those areas just as beautiful or just as detailed as our, 61st Street set, for instance.
Yeah, it's so fascinating, all of that stuff.
But like, we pulled it off, it was successful, and they're just like, all right, well, now what?
Let's do more.
Can we put the Wild West on Long Island? Sure, why not?
Create an English castle?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, you and your team have done a wonderful job once again with this season. So, Douglas, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for talking to us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great.
Well, Tom, Douglas is so fascinating to talk with. I mean, his job requires so much, but again, it's one that you shouldn't even notice if it's done right.
That's right. I mean, half of the things that he just mentioned, I hadn't even realized were visual effects. So Well done to the entire team. Well, that wraps it up for us today. After you watch the new episode of The Gilded Age on Sunday, listen to or watch our official companion podcast, which is available wherever you find podcasts. Thanks so much for listening.
Bye-bye.
This has been the official Gilded Age podcast, written, hosted, and produced by Alicia Malone and me, Tom Meyers.
The podcast is a production of HBO in collaboration with Pod People.
For Pod People, our supervising producer is Rebecca Chasson, associate producer is Sam Gabauer, and our video editor is Susana Vasquez. Special thanks to Hannah Pedersen and Amy Machado.
For HBO Podcasts, our executive producer is Michael Gluckstadt, and associate producer is Aaron Kelly.